Alright everyone, let's go ahead and jump right into the next chapter of You Have the Right to Remain Fat. In 2016, for the first time in my life, I tried to explain the connections between sexism, dieting, and internalized inferiority to a group of people. Specifically, I was trying to explain that internalized inferiority is part of sexism, and diet culture feeds on that sense of inferiority. I was giving a lecture about diet culture to a bunch of high school students in Menlo Park, California. Most of the young women in attendance sat in their seats, leaning forward with this expression I can only call the "someone is finally speaking some truth" face. That is some self-aggrandizement phrasing if I have ever heard one. I've noticed that when I talk about sexism that is inherent in diet culture and fat phobia, I'm simply giving language to a feeling most women already have. So I want you to imagine me on a little stage with a podium, my PowerPoint behind me, a bunch of super smart 16-year-olds before me, mainly girls, but some guys too. I told them that there was a really good chance that if I asked each of the women in the room, "Do you feel inferior?" they would most likely say no. They might even scoff as if I were asking a ridiculous question. I imagine that if I asked the average American woman born after the women's liberation movement this question, she would reply the same way. Then I pushed them further. So maybe you don't consciously feel inferior, but what if I asked you some follow-up questions like, "Today, are you wearing something that is physically uncomfortable because you believe it makes you look better? Today, did you refuse to eat something you wanted to eat because you were worried what it might do to the way you look? Today, did you refuse to do something you wanted to do because you were worried about how it would make you look to another person? Today, did you deny an impulse to say no or yes to something that mattered to you because you were worried that someone wouldn't like you if you did it?" I told the young women in the audience that if I were going to make an educated guess, I would bet that they said yes to several, if not all, of the follow-up questions. Yet all of the questions were about gauging entrenched inferiority beliefs. How could they answer no to the question of inferiority and answer yes to the questions about whether they had engaged in inferiority-based behavior? I watched a number of the teachers in the audience nod in recognition. The young women seemed sort of stunned, and I was too busy giving them deep eye contact to notice how the guys were reacting. But my guess is that they were either feeling annoyed that I had revealed something that would now make their future relationships with women in the room more difficult, or they were on Reddit. So I think that, keep in mind these are high schoolers, I think more likely they were on Reddit, quite frankly, and I'm not even convinced. Granted, I haven't worked with high school kids, but if high school kids, from what I understand, high school kids have more of a "I don't give a fuck" attitude than middle school students do. And I dealt with middle school students, and the 8th graders had the biggest kind of "I don't give a fuck" attitude. Like they were like, I don't know. I don't know if I believe that. I mean, I'm sure there were like a handful of girls that were really into what she was saying. These are the girls that want to achieve a lot academically, that want the recognition of certain titles like valedictorian or student body president or what have you. Because in this moment, Virgie is essentially an authority figure that because she was endorsed by their teachers bringing them to her. This specific subset of girls that either want to be activists, want to achieve a lot academically or whatever, were probably very invested in what Virgie was saying, because at this age I don't think that they've fully recognized how to critically evaluate the information that they're given. Like, there's still a bit of an authority figure is giving me this information, therefore this information must be true. There's a lot in education that's starting to work on there's a lot in education on how to evaluate sources, but there isn't a whole lot of education on how to evaluate the person that you're listening to that is been endorsed by other authority figures, and how they can still say things that aren't entirely accurate. And just with Virgie's editorializing of how she assumed the young men would react, my guess is that she wasn't behaving solely in this empowering way that she thinks she was, and that or maybe she was for the girls, but it seems like there's feminism that works on creating equity between the genders, and then there's feminism that demonizes men. And I wouldn't be surprised if Virgie gave off the latter vibes. It's always complicated to have defensive men in the room when I'm unveiling the secret mechanism of patriarchy. Good lord, girl. They often don't understand their own investment in the oppression of women because it has been so naturalized to them. I finished the lecture with these thoughts. Inferiority at its core can simply be described as the idea that someone or some group of people aren't good enough or worthy enough at all times without conditions or caveats. When an idea becomes part of a person's worldview and personal belief system, that is what we call internalization. One of the ways that internalization inferiority manifests is the belief that you must do something in order to deserve the things you truly want. It is the belief that is the engine of diet culture. Okay, but that's... I don't know if I agree... I don't agree. I don't agree that there's... I don't agree that internalized inferiority comes from the belief that you must do something in order to deserve the things that you want. I guess the operative word there is deserve. Here's the thing. You do often have to do stuff in order to get stuff that you want. I don't know if I agree with the concept that she is implicitly stating that you deserve everything you want as you are right now. I don't know if I agree with that. I think there are circumstances where you do have to work to get what you want in order to deserve what you want. I don't think that this is going to sound really, really shitty, but for example, the chain smokers. I don't think you necessarily deserve to have peak functioning lungs and be able to run marathons when you smoke through a pack a day. I gotta be honest, I don't think you deserve that. I think the people born with asthma and breathing problems deserve the healthy lungs to get to run, especially those that do their damnedest to work within the realm of what they can do. I think that those with exercise-induced asthma deserve the lungs that would allow them to run without issue at full speed a marathon. I think they deserve that more than someone like Marissa, who eats like shit and is rather sedentary. I'm sure I don't know if she has breathing problems, but she probably doesn't have a whole lot of breathing stamina. And if I was going to award this magical breathing perfect lung stamina, I would give it to the person with exercise-induced asthma that tries very hard to stay fit over Marissa, over a fat activist that does nothing for their health and just eats. I do think there is a level of, does this person deserve this? And I don't think that everyone deserves everything that they want as they are right now. And I think that's why we have to work for things. I really want a thin, svelte body. That's what I want. I don't deserve it right now. I ate like shit this past week. I don't deserve that body based on my own eating patterns and based on how I've behaved. I don't think that you deserve the things you truly want. I guess another operative word is truly. What does truly want mean? But this is high school, so I'm going to keep it at what regular people think when they think want. And I don't think that I do think that you have to work for things in order to deserve them. Not everything. Not everything. I want to be very clear about that. Not everything. I think everyone is entitled to a base level of respect and courtesy, regardless of who they are, along with other things, but this tangent's already going on long enough. When it comes to a result-based want, I don't think that you inherently deserve it. I don't. The one result-based want I would say that I think everyone deserves is to not go hungry. I think that should be a basic human right. And medical care. I don't think medical care should be tied to your job, personally. But now we're getting into political beliefs. So, I'm going to leave it there. But when it comes to general things of I want this nice thing. I want this skill. I want this body. Something that is with, like, 100% within their control of getting it. No, you have to work in order to deserve it. I'm going to leave it there. I explained that it took me a long time to understand what internalized inferiority was and how it manifested. It is very difficult to unlearn ideologies that rely upon inferiority, like dieting, without first recognizing that you have feelings of inferiority. The takeaway from that day at the high school was this: the truth is sometimes hidden from us. When I was learning how to be a good researcher, I was taught the importance of how questions are worded. Sometimes asking someone the most obvious or explicit question isn't the best way to arrive at an actual belief. So what does inferiority feel like? When I was new to activism, I was convinced that if I had unresolved feelings of inferiority, that I would absolutely, without a doubt, know about it. I thought it would be obvious, like the symptoms of a cold or the scrunched up way my stomach feels when I see someone I really hate while I'm out trying to just get a chili dog and enjoy my life. It turns out that it's not that simple. When I was a senior in college, I decided I wanted to produce a series of monologues by women of color. I assembled a cast and coached us through writing and production. Each person was encouraged to write a monologue on whatever topic they wanted. I chose to write about my relationship to my breasts, specifically my nipples. I have brown nipples, and for the longest time I had a lot of shame about that fact. I remember once I ended up fooling around with this train conductor in an empty car on the last train back to my apartment. When I took out my breasts, he proclaimed with ebullient adoration, "My God, your nipples are so dark." This is more than I wanted to know about Virgie's nipples. This is so much more than I want to know about Virgie's breasts. Okay. When he said that, I felt a deep, inexplicable burn in my cheeks. I realize now that I had internalized the idea that pink nipples were normal and beautiful and my brown nipples were not. At the time, I didn't understand that this was a manifestation of internalized racism and the education I received in white superiority. I just thought it was a quirk or an individual issue I had. I remember when I was writing the script for my monologue, some part of me understood that this was a deeper cultural problem and I was the evidence of it. But I couldn't let myself see it. I couldn't admit it. I thought that I was too smart and in control for mass media or cultural influences to fool me. I believed that the shame I felt was happening in a vacuum, when in fact it wasn't. It was not an accident that I had anxiety about the parts of my body that marked me as a person of color. I had been taught from an early age that white features were more attractive than dark features. It was just harder to see because no one had flat out said to me, "You are inferior because you are not white." Rather, the education was subtler, more prolonged, and more obscured. The education of my inferiority wasn't in one place. It was everywhere. Paradoxically, that made it harder to see. Many times, our sense of inferiority is hidden from us. The manifestations of our inferiority ideology might even be experienced as pleasurable, like the excited feeling you get when someone says that it looks like you've lost weight, or the pride you feel when you stopped yourself from eating something with sugar in it, or the elation you may feel when someone you were attracted to finally notices you because you've undertaken the steps to make your body more socially acceptable. I don't think that that's taking pleasure in your inferiority in any way. That's a matter of self-determination and following through with a promise you made to yourself. That's about being consistent in your behavior with your choices, with with your wants. That's working towards a goal that builds pride in yourself because you are doing a hard thing. Many women do not believe that sexism really actually exists anymore, and this means they cannot imagine that sexism affects them. I completely understand why. I myself was once someone who didn't see the value of feminism because I didn't understand what misogyny looked like, and I couldn't see how it affected my life. I didn't know how to look at the signs of misogyny in myself and in the world around me. The signs lived in gestures and feelings, like the way I thought that expressing anger was unattractive, or the way I was much more patient with men's mistakes than women's. But I couldn't point to any single person or any single incident and say, "That's it, that's what's hurting me." I mean, to be fair, I don't think expressing anger would be unattractive, but getting in a rage on either gender is ugly. I certainly don't have more well, this is Reggie's story, so I won't go so much into it, but I tend to think sexism, I don't see it in that internalized way so much. I do think that sexism is still alive and well in the U.S. The overturning of Roe versus Wade, to me, signals that. But also in just some interactions that many women have had with many people. I haven't experienced it a whole lot, I don't think, but there have been men that talk down to me that I highly suspect was because of my gender, given that there would be a guy friend that I had next to me who knew far less about something, and yet I was treated as the stupid one. But I was in a lot of male spaces, male-dominated spaces, as a teenager. And if there's one place that I can say sexism is alive and well, it's the fucking card game room. Not everyone. I want to be I don't want to paint all of these. There's plenty of perfectly nice people, men, in card game areas that were perfectly nice and respectful to me. But that was the one area where I experienced probably the most amount of sexism. And this was primarily in two ways. One, there was always some fucking asshole. Keep in mind, I'm 15, and it's a whole mixed age thing. Like, anyone from 13 and up could play in these tournaments. But there was always some fucking asshole that would, like, comment on my appearance. And because I went through the not like other girls phase where I wore graphic tees and sweats and hoodies a lot, like, it wasn't attractive. I would brush my hair, but that was it. I never did anything with it. Really, and I was chubbier. But, like, there was always a guy at the table that would go on about women that he felt were attractive and hot. And without fail, one of these assholes, like, I want to be clear, it wasn't, like, everyone. It was always, like, one or two guys at the tournament that would be like, yeah, I'd never date you. You're not very attractive. I deserve a model. And meanwhile, these guys always smelled the worst out of anyone. What they say about gaming areas and then conventions is true. No one knows how to use fucking deodorant. But there was always at least one or two guys like that. The other way where I think sexism was relatively prevalent is, as a girl, I was often quizzed to prove my worthiness of being there. It was a very gatekeepy area where I had to, like, rattle off facts about the game or about the series that the game was based on, because I was very into Yu-Gi-Oh! And I played Yu-Gi-Oh! And that was a thing. And I did used to revel in it, being like, yeah, bitch, I fucking know that, and would rattle off, and I'd gain a lot of acceptance there. After about, 20, I think it was around 20, when this fucking GameStop guy, here's the thing, looking back on it, I don't know if he was quizzing me or if it was his very poor attempt at flirting, but there was this survey thing that I used to do, and I would get GameStop gift cards. So I had $25, and I would go in, and I would buy whatever game that I didn't actually have to spend money out for. And so I was grabbing this one that ended up, I don't even remember what it was. It was some time-based game, like time travel-based game, and it fucking sucked. It was stupid. But I grabbed it, not knowing at the time, just thinking like, oh, it has kind of an anime cover. I'll grab it. And then this guy fucking is quizzing me on the difference between JRPGs and Western RPGs. And so, yeah. I forgot my point. I went on such a tangent. I forgot my point. I guess my point is that I do think that sexism is alive and well, especially in certain areas. I don't think that some of her examples are great examples of sexism. I guess that's how I'm going to phrase that. A lot of this has to do with the fact that language and meaning have become increasingly detached. Sexism has become a deeply coded set of behaviors that are difficult to unlock if you don't know how to see them. It can take special access to education and language in order to unveil sexist behavior. Often, that critical language is cast as suspect, overly intellectual, or a product of paranoid fantasy. We are at a point culturally where it requires more resources than ever to recognize oppression. You must have access to more knowledge and a more nuanced understanding of language to be able to spot its new incarnations. And because the knowledge is more specialized and not obvious to everyone, the person who points out oppression risks being cast as a professional victim. Women have been told over and over that sexism is a thing of the past. Stop being a party pooper already. So being able to identify and call out sexism comes at a high price socially and sometimes professionally. It's important to recognize that there have been legal advances won by feminists. Women have more rights and access than previous generations could have dreamed of, and certain overt sexist behavior has become taboo. Women now legally have the right to a harassment-free environment at work. This is a wonderful thing, but misogynists have taken advantage of and manipulated the space that has been left in the wake of more obvious manifestations of oppression. It's excellent that we are protected from overt gender discrimination, but since sexism hasn't been eradicated, it's only been litigated. Now women bear the burden of proving that sexism is happening. Many women refuse to speak up because they have a legitimate fear of being ostracized. It is important to realize that overt sexist behavior is only possible through an entrenched belief of women's inferiority. One of the challenges for feminists is that we as a culture can legislate the overt behavior and yet the ideology can remain intact. This is not a failure on our part, but rather the dogged commitment that misogynists have to our dehumanization. Ideologies of oppression are more slippery than rights. They are difficult, if not impossible, to legislate. I think about the 100 small ways that I and other women find ourselves subject to this new silent sexism every day. I think about how the service at the dude-heavy coffee shop down the street from my apartment is friendlier and warmer when I have cleavage exposed. I have run tests. This reminds me that sexual desirability is always expected of me. Performing femininity extra special hard feels like a particular expectation of me because I am a fat woman and my bigness always makes others call my gender into question. That feels like a bit of a leap, and I'm curious about the tests that you run. Just curious. I think about the way that it's overwhelmingly men who tweet death wishes and harass me online and dox other vocal feminists. I have to fight the impulse to communicate submission when I need something professionally from a straight man. I know that flirtation is expected by many men when it comes to professional opportunities, and so I sometimes find myself offering a feigned sexual interest in them so that they are assuaged and safe in the knowledge that they have control over me, even as I'm asking for things that will give me more financial freedom. What in the fuck? I think she's overthinking some of her interactions. Never flirted with anyone that I was speaking professionally to for some help. Ever. I don't get this. Please. Someone explain to me. Because I don't understand this thought process. Is this just some vergyism? Have you guys experienced it? Because this is fucking baffling to me. What in the fuck? I don't get that. I think she's placing thoughts and expectations of others in her own head on this front. I think about how much I hate dating because of how exhausting it is dealing with men's pathological desire to wrench power away from me. It starts with the verbiage of my profile. I have to decide between being honest, I'm a fat feminist, and getting no responses, and using saccharine buzzwords that advertise sexual allure and describe my physical and intellectual qualities as consumable goods that will improve his life. I am an articulate, busty BBW. Okay, to be fair though, I think that kind of goes both ways on dating apps. Granted, I have never used a dating app. I don't fucking know. I don't date. My sister has, and she's gone through pictures of guys and rejected quite a few of them. I think making yourself desirable is something that happens with both sexes on that front. And tailoring your words is another thing that happens. Come on. Every fucking I'm fucking ace, and I've never dated in my life, and even I know that if someone puts "I'm a nice guy" on their dating profile, that they should be fucking avoided. Alright? I know. Tried to give a male friend that advice, like, that is universal red flag behavior to put that on your profile. He didn't listen to me. And we had a falling out for other reasons. But, like, it was a regular thing where he had issues with dating, and I tried to give him, not advice, but just a woman's perspective of some of the things that he was describing, and he fucking blew me off. Didn't believe me. And he's still single as far as I know. He wasn't a terrible guy by any means, but he did himself no favors. But that's a perfect example, though, of how men have to craft their dating profile as well. Once we are seeing each other in real life, then there's a new minefield to navigate. If I just want sex, then he wants more. If I don't want just sex, then I'm needy. I found that it doesn't matter what I want because most men just want the opposite of what I desire. This is about control. I don't think so. I think it's about compatibility. I don't think that that's necessarily about control. I think those guys are, like, if they just want sex and you don't, I don't think that makes you needy, but it definitely makes you incompatible. If you just want sex and they want more, then you're still incompatible. I don't think that that's necessarily a control thing. I think they're allowed to want what they want too, so long as everyone's communicating that. From the amount of space that male undergraduates take up to the manspreading I witnessed during my commute, my fat body is frequently attacked on the grounds that I'm not beautiful enough to exist because apparently that is my job as a woman. No, I don't think anyone cares how, like, I don't think anyone equates, like, your fat body with how beautiful or not you are. Although I will say that, couple of bigger women sat next to me on the bus when I would bus back and forth to my university in undergrad. In general, I still preferred them sitting next to me than a guy. It was just more comfortable for me, especially at the end of the day where I was like half nodding off. And just in general, I tend to prefer, I never said anything if a man sat next to me. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't that big of a deal. Given a preference, though, I did prefer girls sitting next to me. But there were a couple of bigger girls on campus that would almost always sit next to me. And there was definitely a squish factor for me of being like squished between the window and them. It had nothing to do with them being beautiful, and I certainly didn't say anything because they have every right to ride the bus as well. And it wasn't really that big of a deal, but I could see how some people would be very annoyed by it, given that there was no personal space to be had with that. But I find it interesting that she calls out, it's not about being beautiful, that's not your job as a woman, and it's not that your fat body, I don't think that I gotta be honest, I don't actually think her fat body is what she phrases as frequently attacked on the grounds that I am not beautiful enough to exist because apparently that's my job as a woman. I don't think it's attacked because she's not beautiful enough. She mentions, like, commute during her commute and witnessing manspreading. But I find it interesting because I've had the unfortunate privilege of sitting next to, it was just this one guy. All the other men that ever sat next to me on the bus were fine and respected personal space. This one guy, fucking, like, he might as well have been doing the splits. His legs were open so wide. This was before, like, the term manspreading was even a thing. He was a skinny guy, and I was, that time I was a bit more annoyed because it's like, there's no reason why one leg should be out in the middle of the aisle and the other one pressing against my leg, and my legs are already pressed, like, toward the side of the bus. Like, stop being a dick. But an argument could be made that, like, the fat girl sitting next to me invading my space and then him sitting next to me and invading my space are on the same spectrum. And I could see how it would equally annoy both people. I find it interesting that she calls out the manspreading, but she doesn't recognize how bus seats are, again, made for average-sized people, and how someone sitting next to you who is fat can still be invading your space, and that can annoy some people. It doesn't annoy a lot of people. There are a lot of people that are just like, it's fucking, it is what it is. It doesn't matter. But, like, everyone's just trying to get home. But there are some people that have a lot of problems with it and are very protective over their personal space. I'm going on a lot of tangents this video. I think about the condescending comments I get from men online who tell me that they honestly think I'd be so beautiful if I lost weight, as if that were the goal of my life or my politics. I think about the 1,000 ways that women in my family were silently and sometimes outright expected to give up their lives, their dreams, and their desires so that they could become the glorified babysitters for the men in their lives who wanted a legacy but none of the responsibility of child rearing. Again, I think that's a generation, well, not again, because that was a different video, but for this, I'm going to say it here. I think this is a difference in generational understandings of family and expectations around that. Definitely is sexist, but it doesn't support her overall argument of sexism in the modern world today, because she's talking about the past and generational differences and generational difference in expectations. I think of the way that women are expected to become mothers, giving up their lives while still being the object of scorn and pity, while men are praised for having dad bods. For the most part that I know, moms aren't objects of scorn and pity, as far as I know, and most moms aren't necessarily expected to give up their dreams, at least not in the US. There's plenty of working mothers. As far as I know, they aren't, like, pitied. I think the only time moms get, well, not the only time, but when they probably feel it the most strongly is if it's like the first person in a friend group to have a baby. And there's going to be some friends that have a lot of problems because they want to go out partying and new mommy can't. And then there's going to be those that pity her because, new mommy can't. So there's that. I do think that dads tend to be, and I think it's evening out now. It was more prevalent about 10 years ago where men, just for changing a diaper, would get a lot of praise. I feel like it's a little bit more even now because dads take on more of child-rearing responsibilities. But I don't know firsthand, so it's hard for me to say. Men feel the right to control what women eat, even women they don't know. Emma Gray wrote an article in 2014 for the Huffington Post about a male stranger yelling at her as she left a frozen yogurt shop in New York. "Hey girl, you shouldn't be eating that. You're gonna get fat." She conceptualized the comment as both a manifestation of men's perceived right to control and intimidate women in public and this stranger's perceived right to control what she might look like in the future. The more we trust our instincts and our experiences, the easier it is to identify sexism. The challenge, of course, is that women are systematically taught not to trust our instincts or our experiences. One of the first times I remember being advised to question myself was during childhood, when I was told that I wasn't hungry even though I was. I was taught as a child that I couldn't trust my body because my mind was playing tricks on me. I was told that I should question my body's demands for food and instead ask myself whether I'm not just actually bored or tired. This was one of my first lessons in self-doubt. I think that was actually, depending on how old you were though, I can understand why. Because, like, if you're a kid, that it kind of depends on what you asked for. Like, if a kid comes to you and says you're hungry, I don't necessarily think that the right option is to say you're not hungry. I think if the kid says, "I'm hungry, I want some cake," what you do is say, "Okay, no cake right now, though. Here is a healthy snack." And if the kid says no, then they're probably not actually hungry. They just want something that tastes good, or they're just bored, or whatever. Like, I don't think there's any problem offering a kid who says they're hungry some fruit, especially if, like, dinner is close by, like, gonna be soon or something. Like, or they just ate not too long ago, then offer them a piece of fruit or something with fiber. I don't necessarily think that there's problems with that, but I also don't think that what she presented is inherently toxic and causing her to necessarily question her own body's cues, because I think that we can misinterpret our body's cues. I think that's how I'm gonna phrase it. I think that a misinterpretation can happen where boredom or tiredness can result in, or thirst can result in someone eating more than they really need. And so saying maybe instead, before you eat, here, drink a glass of water, and then I'll give you something. Not to fill them up, not to for like diet purposes, but because the kid might be thirsty and not actually hungry. Because I've had plenty of times where I thought I was hungry and I drank a bunch of water and I realized how thirsty I was. And once I finished with my water, I was no longer hungry. So I think it's worth teaching kids that not everything that you interpret as hunger may actually be hunger. You take these few steps, and if you're still hungry, then eat. But it'd be worth it to teach them, let's see, you're bored and you say you're hungry, do me a favor, just walk around the house, get a few different sights, that sort of thing. If they end up distracted and they're no longer hungry, perfect. They come back, they say they're still hungry, you give them a glass of water. They finish the glass of water, they still say they're hungry, give them some food. I don't think it's wrong to have them go through a few paces. They're not going to die for 20 minutes of delayed food. Being pushed into situations where we doubt our experiences of reality is called gaslighting. Gaslighting shows up in diet culture a lot. There are real cultural problems like sexism, body shame, fat phobia, and myriad injustices many of us are dealing with all of the time. This is one of the times, someone brought this up before. She uses myriad as an adjective, but I need to reread when she used it last. But in this situation, as she's phrasing it, I think it would be better in noun, in which case it would be a myriad of sexism, body shame, fat phobia, and a myriad of injustices. Not myriad injustices. I just think it works better. It's not technically, I don't think it's technically wrong, but using myriad as an adjective is clunky if you don't know exactly how to use it. And I don't think Virtue does. And yet we are told over and over again by mainstream narratives that these problems reside within us. The real problem is that women are angry, and we are trained to turn the anger inward and experience it as shame. And yet we are told and we believe that the problem is our body. The real problem is diet culture. And yet we are told and we believe that the problem is our inability to be thin. The real problem is that we live in a country that promotes size-based bigotry, and yet we are told and we believe that the problem is that we are not healthy enough. The real problem is a culture that uses weight as a proxy for humanity and morality, and yet we are told and we believe that the problem is that we don't know how to eat correctly. The real problem is that women don't feel like we can eat what we want or wear what we want or live how we want, and yet we are told and we believe that we can fix this existential crisis through controlling portion size. The real problem is that our culture is maintained through a vitriolic matrix of sexism, racism, misogyny, transphobia, ableism, healthism, and classism that erodes the physical, spiritual, and mental health of all people. And yet we are told and we believe that the problem is that we aren't trying hard enough. Diet culture teaches women that we need to lose weight by any means necessary, thereby reducing us to mere bodies who either do or do not conform to externally set standards. This is dehumanization, plain and simple. To put it plainly, dieting is a little bit like someone pissing on your leg and telling you it's raining. Except it's more like someone shitting on your face and then asking you for $1 and then going into your house and systematically shitting on everything of value that you own and then setting the shit-filled home. This is one heck of a fucking metaphor, and it's going on for, this is one sentence that was filled with the sound of laughter and love, but that now's just filled with shit, on fire, and then blaming you for it. That was nearly a paragraph. For the record, that was nearly a paragraph, because I forgot that you guys can't see this, but that was nearly a full paragraph. That whole metaphor was nearly a full paragraph with only one sentence. And I got it in one take. And dieting is the outcome of the belief that we don't deserve to live life on our own goddamn terms. And that belief is so entrenched and all-encompassing that it affects even each spoonful of food we eat. I disagree. I don't think that there's a belief that we don't get to live by our own terms. Like, I think that probably follows you through your 20s a little bit because you're so used to living by your parents' terms. But once you get to your 30s, like, you stop fucking caring and live how you want to live. At least that was my experience. I think she's putting entirely too much emphasis and too much power in dieting itself. I think this comes from her mentality and not necessarily the general understanding of dieting and weight loss. I think that her and her fat acceptance and fat liberation people are putting entirely too much, pun not intended, but weight on this concept that they can choose to opt out of. You don't have to opt in to dieting and weight loss. You don't have to. Like, it's a choice, and people are allowed to have thoughts, and I don't think that you should be harassed for it by any means, and I think that you should still have a basic level of respect given to you. But you can opt out of this. So that is the end of this chapter. I think we're on chapter 5. That's the end of chapter 5. Quick update. It was my birthday this week. I forgot to mention it in the Monday video, but my birthday was Monday. I'm still technically recording this the Saturday before, but little quick updates. I ate like shit this past week, so I chose not to weigh myself, and I'm going to get back on plan starting on Monday on my birthday, because part of it was because I made one of my favorite summer meals, and I made like a double batch, and it was a shit ton of food. It was far more than I even expected. And what was really interesting was that this double batch, I would normally be able to eat through a huge amount of it. It's a mango salsa with these chicken skewers. It's fabulous and I love it. But normally, under normal circumstances, I would eat through bowl after bowl after bowl of that, and I still ate far more than I was supposed to. And I didn't record it because I didn't really know. What it really was is that I didn't want to go through the trouble of putting all of the ingredients into MyFitnessPal and going through the recipe bullshit. So I was very lazy this week. So I ate like a shit ton of that with what I think was my real downfall were the tortilla chips that I ate them with. So I did not do well on my eating this week. I'm going to get back on track. Well, I might give myself my birthday as well, and just here's the thing. I'm going to do well tomorrow. The salsa is officially gone. Do well tomorrow, cut myself some slack on my birthday, and then get back on track hardcore on Tuesday, which was yesterday by the time this video goes up. But that's beside the point. So that's my plan going forward. I've chosen not to weigh myself because I'm like, I know I fucked up, and I'd rather just get back on track and not see the consequences of my actions right now. So there was that. On the manga front, I am nearly caught up manga-wise with where the anime left off. So I'm really looking forward to getting in to the story that I haven't actually seen yet. It's been pretty slow going because I've been writing my capstone for my master's program, and it started with, and that's what I did this week, was read through 19 articles. The articles ranged from 10 pages to 40 pages, with the average probably being around 25. So I read about 5 articles a day for 4 days, and it changed. The information available in there was very interesting, but it was not in line with my research topic, and so I have to change my research topic, so I had to email my professor and get clearance on my new research topic, and they still have not gotten back to me, and I'm just like, I want to fucking start on the research question and the problem statement on Monday, so that way I can get into the literature review by Tuesday and hopefully finish it by the end of the week. And the literature review, it has to be a mandatory of 9 to 10 pages, which is annoying. I hate the writing portion of any research project. I hate citing things. Like, I know it's necessary, and I know that sounds weird, but it's not that I hate citing, I hate saying, like, this is where I got it. I hate the fucking, because the program that I'm in right now is fucking crazy about doing things exactly as they're supposed to do them. Like, I will get points taken off if there is a period out of place in my citation, and I fucking hate it. I fucking hate citations. It's fucking annoying. I hate it so much. Oh god, I hate it so much. So, I'm gonna leave it there. Thank you for watching. I'm pretty sure this one was really long. Yes. Should be good for you guys. So I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.